Well, hello. I'm speaking to you on the 30th of December, 2024, and I'd like to talk a little bit about Gnosticism. Gnosticism is a very interesting phenomenon in the early centuries of Christianity, uh, second and third century. Gnosticism became a very, very strong current in Christianity. They were Christians, but they didn't believe in the what became later the proto-orthodox vision of Christianity. That is Gnostics, and there were many, many groups that have been all combined under the definition of Gnosticism. But Gnosticism can be defined as Christians who believed that the material world was evil and was created by an evil deity, not even a deity, a lesser supernatural being, a demiurge. The Sethians, a very prominent Gnostic group, had a very interesting creation myth, which said that an unknowable God existed at the spiritual level, that is, an unknowable God that was pure spirit, and he emanated a spiritual realm that included pairs of spiritual deities called aeons that in their totality were known as the penumbra. And this spiritual world was then populated by the spiritual universe was then populated by these aeons and pairs, the last of which was a female deity known as Sophia. And she wanted to mimic or copy the creative acts of the unknowable God, who emanated beings of perfection, but was unable to do that. And she then, through a tragedy or catastrophe, gave birth to a lesser deity known as Yaldabaoth. Later, probably a word that means Yahweh Lord of Hosts. Um, but this deity, which was then associated with the Jewish God Yahweh, created a material world, but for evil purposes. This is not a material world created in the best interests of humanity, but rather to capture humanity. Humanity, or at least part of humanity, was given spiritual sparks, divine sparks, from Sophia. And it was an attempt, the creation of this material world was an attempt by the deity, the lesser deity, the evil deity, Yaldabaoth, to capture Sophia or capture her divine spiritual nature. And he created a material world which was evil, and the very purpose of salvation was not based on faith, particularly in Jesus's death and resurrection, but rather a knowledge that would allow human beings to know themselves, to know what was within them, that spiritual, divine essence within them, and then use that knowledge to escape the material world. Different Gnostic groups had different methods of escaping the material world, and some had slightly different or different myths, but they all shared the idea that the world was a material prison, either created by an evil god or a god that was in error or was a god that was just based on human justice. Uh, Many of the Christian Gnostic groups, Jesus was seen as a liberator, someone that was sent from the penumbra down to earth to impart human beings with this secret knowledge that would allow them then to escape the material world. One of the a number of texts associated with Gnostic sects was discovered in 1945 in Egypt at a place called Nag Hammadi. And it allowed us to look into the nature of early Christianity in the second and third centuries. Before that, we had Ireneaus' work against heresies, or against so-called Gnosticism. And Irenaeus and other Christian apologists or Christian fathers wrote about the Gnostics. They got some of the myths correctly, but they decried the truth. I mean, they basically argued that the Gnostics were a heresy. And they ultimately won out. The proto-orthodox won out and were able to defeat or at least overcome the certain popularity of Gnosticism early on. Gnostics saw the world with all its imperfections and thought it quite peculiar or paradoxical that a God who had created this world was a good, all-powerful, all-benevolent deity. And therefore they swung to that myth of evil creator with evil assistants called archons. They tried to conceptualize the Bible in that, or interpret the biblical records, the biblical books, on the basis of that myth. But they use the same books. Marcion may have been an early Gnostic. He rejected the Jewish canon because, again, he believed that the God of the Jewish scriptures, the Old Testament, could not be the God that sent Jesus to the world. It was just too contradictory. And Marcion then created the first Bible, the Bible canon, by using a edited version of Luke and some of Paul's letters. Paul himself has elements that one could interpret as Gnostic in nature, so that the theology between Gnostics and Christians often intersect. And certainly Valentinian, one of the early important voices in Gnosticism, was supposedly tutored by Theudas, a disciple of Paul. And Valentinian did rise up in the church hierarchy to the point of almost being elected pope, although he was a leader of a Gnostic sect, the Valentinians. Again, Gnosticism survived for a very long time, but always as a heresy. The Cathars may have been Gnostics. The Bogomils in the Middle Ages may have also been Gnostics, and it did not succeed in popularizing itself to the extent that it could challenge proto-orthodoxy and the Christian church. But Gnosticism has, I think it failed in part because, well, it had a hierarchy. It believed that certain people were spiritual and therefore would ascend to that spiritual penumbra, and others would not. Others were, and that was an element, particularly in Valentinianism. And that was one of the elements where proto-Christianity had a much more egalitarian view, although it did have a hierarchy ultimately in the church. But the theology of the proto-Orthodox tended to be much more egalitarian. The other element that I think that Gnostics lacked in promoting their vision is that they didn't have a hell. Hell was, in fact, this earth. In a way, the devil had created the material universe. So it had no hell to uses the stick to the carrot of heaven. While the proto-orthodox used hell very effectively to promote conversions and strict adherence to its theology. Again, Gnosticism is a very, very interesting phenomena. The Gospel of Thomas, for example, talks about one achieving immortality by bringing out what is within us, that is a divine spark, so that the Gospel of Thomas, which is one of the earliest Gnostic Gospels, is can be described as kind of inherently spiritual. Because it doesn't contain any of the stories of Jesus, that is his ministry or his miracles and so on, but rather the sayings of Jesus. And it is also viewed by many scholars as a first century document, that is concurrent with the Gospel of John or shortly thereafter, written shortly thereafter. So first century, that is the first 100 years after Jesus. Gospel of John is usually dated to 95 to 100. Gospel of Thomas has been recently dated to 120 or so. And there is controversy over that among scholars, but it is an interesting debate. The most important of the Gnostic texts found at Nag Hammadi might be the secret revelation of John, which is not the revelation of John you find in the Bible, but another revelation, a Gnostic revelation that details this creation myth and the Gnostic concern with the material versus the spiritual. Again, if this has been interesting and helpful, please subscribe to the channel. It does help, and I appreciate any comments. Goodbye.